I think that was the moment that took me out of autopilot, and I was like, that's really scary that I can't remember the last time I was truly peaceful. What am I doing? What do I actually want?
Hi, I'm Danielle, and welcome back to Making Space. Not just a podcast, but a place for honest, open conversations about where people have been and who they're becoming. So, it finally happened. I turned 25 last week, and since the theme of season 2 is growing up, in some ways you could say this episode is the climax. To my surprise, turning 25 actually felt pretty good, and if anything, I'm glad I can finally say my prefrontal cortex is fully developed. But at the same time, life isn't all sunshine and rainbows, and in some ways, turning 25 has left me with more questions than answers. My friend Quynh and I explore this tension more in today's episode. Quynh and I actually met over 10 years ago during my freshman year of high school because we rode the same bus home, but our friendship really blossomed the following year when we took French 2 together. In addition to our questionable French speaking abilities, we've always bonded over our love for pop culture and yapping. Quynh is such a kind and lovable person, so I'm thrilled to finally have her on the podcast. We actually recorded this episode on the eve of my 25th birthday, so it's basically a stream of consciousness about what we're thinking about and learning in this season of life. Before we get into the conversation, I have a special birthday request. Please rate the podcast and leave a review wherever you listen if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. So, what is something you have learned or are currently learning that you wish your younger self could have known?
I wish I could go back and tell myself that things are just not that serious. I feel like I've always been a scared child. It was probably a combination of like my parents being overly cautious about everything. I was the only girl, always warning me about like the worst case scenario. But also I just feel like I've always just been a very anxious girl. Like I remember I would have yearly piano recitals, and every night before would like be up all night worrying about it, would like throw up before getting on stage. Like
Oh
it's
my
just
gosh.
crazy. Like, I was playing the most basic rendition of Old MacDonald. Like no one cared. But it just felt like the biggest deal to me, like in that moment. And so I don't know, it's just like years of being like scared. I'm just like a scared adult now of everything. Always scared, always anxious. So I guess I just wish someone would have told me like it's okay to be in embarrassing situations and mess up, you know? And that people are probably too worried about their own cringy moments to even remember yours. So
That's true. And so is it like, okay, so I watched Inside Out 2 recently, so that's why I'm thinking
so
about
did
this.
I.
Okay. So then is it like fear? Is it anxiety? Is it both? Because I remember at one point they were like fear and
Yeah.
anxiety like each other.
It's fear of messing up, it's fear of failure, it's fear of being embarrassed
Yeah.
and being perceived, and that causes anxiety. I think it's just like a cycle.
Yeah. And it sounds like a perfectionism thing too. And I feel like
Oh
only
yeah,
children, I think that's like a common thing for only children.
for sure.
Okay, so is there a point where you were like, when did you realize, like come to this realization about being afraid, taking things so seriously? Or did it kind of happen naturally to where you were like, actually, maybe it's okay to take a risk and to fail?
I think I'm always in a position where I'm forced to take the risk. I rarely ever, or at least I'm not aware of when I do it. And
Mm-hmm.
the realization of my anxiety usually comes when I know rationally, I'm like, this is not something to freak out about, yet I can't stop the visceral attack on my body that I feel. And it's very frustrating because I'm like, objectively, I know even worse, the worst case that I'm imagining in my head, even if it were to happen, my life would go on, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, I can't help but feel that fear. Yeah. And that's like the most frustrating part about it, especially like in med school where I'm constantly uncomfortable,
Yeah.
like forced out of my comfort zone. those like two areas of my brain are like constantly at odds.
Interesting. And so do you feel like getting older has helped it, or do you feel like it's made it worse?
I think it helps being aware of it because I know there are tools that I can use to mitigate it, like therapy, meditation, exercising, just like taking care of myself.
Mhm.
Whereas before, like as a child, I just thought like, oh, this is the way things are, and like it's always going to be like this. There's nothing for me to do about it. And also hearing people talk about it on social media and like their own experiences and like my friends talking about how they feel and like relating to that has definitely helped as well. So I don't feel so alone anymore.
Yeah. I mean, at least for me, I think in general, I already felt like I was prone to like having an existential crisis. Just, they just kind of creep up on you.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've had a quarter life crisis? And do you feel like this kind of tendency that you have to
Mhm.
just like feel like you're at odds with thinking rationally and then like having fear and anxiety about things? Do you feel like that also fuels it for you?
Definitely, because those are like the two voices that I've mentioned to you. But like there's like a million different voices sometimes that I feel like go through
Yeah.
my head. Yeah, so to the question of do I feel like I've had a quarter life crisis? For sure. I feel like I have many ones, but
Yeah.
I could remember like a more significant one when I was studying for dedicated. It's the period of time that your school gives you to study for step one. It's one of the board exams that you need to take to apply to residency.
Hmm.
And it's like kind of notorious for being a test that takes a lot out of you, like emotionally and mentally. So, yeah, it was 6 weeks of just studying every day, like 8 hours.
Wow.
And I just remember being so like emotionally volatile during that time. And so much of my sense of self was tied to like my productivity during the day. If I didn't feel like I got 5 or 6 hours of good studying in, I would feel so guilty.
Hmm.
And a lot of people will give you advice, right, from upperclassmen. They'll be like, yes, you need to study, but don't forget to take care of yourself, like take some time off. But like no one really talks about how hard it is to actually do that for yourself,
Yeah.
especially because you're like, this test holds so much weight, right, for whatever that next step is that you need to take in your career goals. And I think with any long term goals that you have, on one end, it gives you kind of like direction and something to work towards. But on the other side of things, like after you make that decision for yourself, it's very easy to fall into autopilot where you just kind of keep chugging along and you rarely kind of sit back and think about like reevaluate, like, is this something that I still want to do for myself?
This long-term goal.
Exactly. Like this decision that I made
Hmm.
2, 3 years ago, like, do I still feel the same way about it? Is it something that still brings me happiness? Is it something I'm still passionate about? And it's the whole like sunken cost fallacy where you feel like you've put so much time and effort into it that it's like even scary to question.
Mm.
So yeah, like, and it was in dedicated where like all I had to do was study, and I don't know, I was just like feeling kind of down because I wasn't seeing anybody, not taking care of myself. And the one thing that I told myself that I was gonna do, because like I couldn't find time to work out, wasn't eating 3 times a day, but I was like, what I can do is every morning I'm telling myself I'm gonna spend 10 minutes meditating. And so
Hmm.
I'd sit down in front of my window, put on some meditation music, and just try to clear my head as much as I can. And it's so funny because like I think I can only go like maybe like 15 or 20 seconds at a time without some attack of a thought like
Hmm.
itself in my head, like just random cringy moments that I remember from like the past. But during one of the sessions towards the end of my dedicated, I like had a vision of myself on top of this hill, and there's just like a bunch of beautiful greenery around me, and I could like hear like waves in the background, and like all the senses were heightened in my body, and I just felt so like happy and at peace. And it made me so sad because I couldn't remember like the last time I had felt so happy, you know? And so
Wow.
I think that was the moment that took me out of autopilot. And I was like, that's really scary that I can't remember the last time I was truly peaceful. What am I doing? What do I actually want? Yeah. So I think that to me felt like the beginning of a quarter life crisis in a way, where I actually had to like ask myself the important questions that I had been kind of like avoiding for a while.
And that is around what you're pursuing as a future career. Like, is this actually what I want?
Yes, but also within it, like how do I want it to look, right? Because like being a doctor, that's very broad because there's so many different specialties and so many ways you can practice. And there's so many different voices too. Like you're in this bubble of privilege. I myself recognize the privilege of feeling like one of the most stressful things in my life is deciding like what I want to do for my career as a doctor, you know? But like being
Hmm.
in this bubble with everyone else who's constantly telling you like, oh, this specialty, that's what you want to go into, that must mean you're not like a competitive applicant, or like that specialty is not going to make you the money that you want. Just like constant opinions, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
help but like feel it and ruminate about it. So
It sounds like what you're saying is this is kind of what triggered you, like that
yeah.
experience of being in this high pressure season of studying for
Mhm.
this exam kind of triggered you to be like, wait.
Like I'm in my 20s. You know, like why am I spending 8 hours a day at a coffee shop when like there's so much of the world that I haven't seen? Like, it was just crazy.
But I think what you were saying is making me realize, because a lot of times you hear about a quarter life crisis and you're like, oh, this is a bad thing that you don't want to happen. And like, I literally remember, I may have even said this on like the first episode of this season in January. I was like, basically, I have all these goals for myself of things I need to get done or need to get together that are in my control before I turn 25, because if not, I'm going to have a crisis and like I need to avoid that at all costs.
Mm,
So I was just so hyper fixated on avoiding having a crisis because you think that the outcome is a bad thing.
mhm.
But what you're saying is making me think that actually, like, it forces you to think about some important things that you need to be thinking about. Like,
Yeah,
as your brain is developing, as you're having more experiences, you're like, actually, what is important to me? Actually, what
mhm.
do I want to spend my time doing? How do I want my time to look? Because I think so much of our lives growing up is just informed by what everyone around you is
Exactly,
doing,
yeah.
like your environment. Like we went to the same high school, and that was like a very particular
Mhm,
environment. The people there were all very similar in the sense that they
mhm,
were like very driven. And then you go to college and it's like a similar thing. And now you're in med school, which selects all those particular people, you know,
mhm.
puts them in the same environment.
Yeah,
And so it's like you're looking around you and everyone's like, oh, you should be doing this
mhm,
because this will be the better outcome, or this will like make you the most money or whatever and
mhm.
whatever. And finally, like it's the crisis that makes you say, wait, actually, maybe that's not what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
So I just think that's interesting that like maybe the outcome is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely made me reevaluate things. And obviously, it's not like those fears and those voices are gonna just like disappear, but it definitely made me more aware of it for sure.
Yeah. And I think maybe the crisis is not like you said, it's not like a one and done thing.
Mhm.
Kind of just like happens at this age where you just start questioning things. I think for me it'll be random. Like one day I'll wake up and be like, is everything just meaningless? Like
Yeah.
like what is the point? Like
Exactly.
I don't get it. And it's kind of funny. There's this book of the Bible called Ecclesiastes, and there's like a
Mhm.
whole chapter on that, like how everything is meaningless, or it's just like a theme of the book.
Yeah.
So it can be like a thought like that, or it can be like something more negative, which is just,
Mhm.
I feel like the older you get, the more bad things you experience,
Right.
or the more bad things you see other people experience,
Mhm.
which I think is just the reality of life. But I was like, if this is what it is, like I don't want to get older because then it's
Mm.
just going to be like more bad things. And obviously, life is not only all bad things, but it's just facing that harsh reality.
Mhm.
I don't know. It'll just be like thoughts like that that just randomly come up.
Yeah.
And I'm like questioning everything. And it's okay to think about those things because it's just life.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I couldn't have prepared myself to avoid that in any
Exactly.
way.
And you're so much more resilient than you know. Like in the
Hmm.
moment, you'd never realize that you're being adaptable and You never know that you're like facing something that you need to change for and adapt to. But it's like after it happens and you're like, oh, like that was actually a crazy experience that I went through. But now I'm on the other side of things.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think it's that like resilience that you build will help you in the future. Like when
Mm-hmm.
you do face other things,
Yeah.
like the levels of life, you need those skills and you need those experiences.
I don't know. This just reminded me of the decision to have kids. I just feel like it's like there's so much going on in my brain, like in my life. But to think that I'm gonna have to raise a human being and like guide them through that, like, I don't know if I want to do that. It's so
I
scary.
can't help you, sorry.
You know? I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah. I actually had a conversation with a friend about that maybe like a year ago. And she was kind of saying, like, you have such a large impact on your child. Like, you
Mhm.
can literally, like, destroy their life.
Yeah.
Like, it's not funny. But, like your actions, intentionally or unintentionally. And she was like, isn't that so scary?
Hmm.
And it is.
It is. I mean, it's inevitable. Like you are gonna mess up, right? You can't do
Yeah.
everything right. Like it's your first time being a parent. So,
Yeah.
but I think the awareness is a good thing, at least.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't even think. I feel like the issues I have, if I add like worrying about kids on top of that, that's
You
just too
know?
much. Like,
But like we're at that age when like
oh, stop.
it's crazy. It's funny because people like our age are having kids, and I'm like, y'all are babies. Like when it's like actually they're in their mid 20s, and this is actually the time where people do
No, because
this.
listen, at one point I was like, oh my gosh, 25 is like so old. I used to joke when I turned 25, I'm just gonna continue to be 25
Really?
for the foreseeable future until I decide I don't want to be. Because I just felt like it was so, I was like, oh my gosh, that age
Mm,
that sounds so scary. So I'm just gonna stay at that. And now that I'm turning 25, I'm like,
2 hours.
LOL. I'm just like, that can't be old because I
No,
don't
I don't
feel
feel old at
like
all.
I don't feel. I mean, 30 still sounds scary, but like, I'm like 25 is like literally what? Like, I mean, it doesn't help that people still think I'm, I don't know,
In high school, yeah, I get
19.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like on a good day. Like that does not help, but
Yeah.
it's so funny though, looking back and thinking about how I used to think 25
Hmm.
was, and now I'm like, uh but everyone is just at a different place in life
Yeah,
at this
that's
age.
true.
So, what do you feel like you have been learning this year?
So, two things. One, it's so hard to adult. There's so many moving parts. Like, you're telling me I have to study, I have to get 8 hours of sleep, I have to work out, um, do mental health things, see friends, family, and cook my own meal three meals a day. That's just way too much, not enough time in the
Yeah,
day.
that's not even everything.
How do people do it? I don't know how. But I've always had a problem with time management, but it's just so crazy to think about. Yeah. I don't know when I'm going to figure it out because I'm 25 and I'm still like.
But that's the thing. I'm like, do you figure it out, or maybe it just gets easier, or maybe you just figure out how to prioritize things better? But you're also a student. I feel like that makes a difference
That's
because it's
true.
even hard for people that aren't in school.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I guess school's your job, but
Yeah, I think it's just hard to have like a strict routine as a student, especially being on rotations now. My schedule is changing every 4 to 8 weeks, and I'm just having to roll with the punches.
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like even if I did have 24 hours of the day to myself, I'd find a way to waste it.
And then it's like, what is actually wasting your
True.
day? Especially like, what if it's just rest that you really
Yeah.
needed? You know?
Yeah. But the other thing, I feel like it like has to do with the whole resting thing. I recently saw a podcast where there were two doctors talking about a book called The Five Regrets of the Dying.
Oh.
And one of the regrets was that people were saying, like, I wish I hadn't worked that hard. That was like one of the regrets.
Oh.
And they were talking about how obviously anything that's worthwhile requires hard work, right? But that actually working too hard comes from like the unconscious need to validate your existence, like
Hmm.
in the world. And just hearing that made me so emotional because I feel like that's exactly what I'm always doing is I'm working hard to in a way prove to people that I deserve to be here. Like I deserve a spot in this med school. I deserve to like to take up space when really I'm just like worthy as I am, you know?
Hmm.
Like I can obviously do things to better myself, but even without all of that, like I'm worthy to be here, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it just all ties into like, it's okay to like take a break because I don't need to just be working to like prove something all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is something that I'm trying to remind myself. Like I'm not a med student, like I'm, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't define me.
Yeah. That's so good. And it's hard not to let the thing that is taking up all your time
Yeah.
completely define who you are. Because when
Hmm.
people ask, oh, what do you do? You're going to say,
Yeah.
I'm in med school. But I think that's just so interesting, especially with what we've talked about, with you coming to this realization of, hey, actually, like, I don't have to choose this career path that is
Hmm.
going to take,
Everything out of
yeah, to
me.
like take everything out of me. Like, it's actually like not
The
that.
soul.
Like I don't have to do that. Like actually I can
Yeah.
like choose something that gives me a better work-life
Hmm.
balance, even if it's maybe less quote unquote
Prestigious.
competitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, prestigious.
Hmm.
And I think I've been thinking about that lately, just like this chase for prestige, especially because I feel like the legal field and people have been telling me this and I didn't really understand what they were saying. And I'm starting to understand it more now. And this is like me pre even starting law school. So I'm interested to see what I think about it after I start.
Hmm.
But that basically there's a lot of elitism and people are like always chasing that, whether they need to be a part of a certain organization because
Mm.
it is looked on more highly, or they need
Yeah.
to join a certain firm when they graduate, like work at a certain firm because like
Yeah.
those are the highest ranked or whatever.
Mm.
And a lot of times that is associated with a worse quality of life,
Hmm.
maybe worse relationship with your
Yeah.
coworkers because you
Like step
like,
on toes to get to the top.
yeah, and people are unhappy
Yeah.
and things like that. But that doesn't matter. Because of the name, they'll chase it
Mm.
to the end, is what I've been hearing about the legal field. And I've been seeing that more. And I'm like, I know myself, right?
Mm.
I know what's important to me. And it's like, why is it so easy for people to just throw away what they thought was important or like overlook that just because it's what everyone else is doing or what everyone else is
Yeah.
chasing? And so it's kind of reminding me of what you're saying about realizing, hey, I didn't need to work so hard. Like, I didn't need to go for that position
Hmm.
just because it was looked at so highly, if maybe it wasn't even like that aligned with my
Right.
goals
Yeah.
or what I really wanted to do.
Hmm. It's like, why are you doing this? Like, that's like asking yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking about how it's like a never-ending cycle. Like there will always be something.
Hmm.
Like even like going back to school, you thought all it was just applying and then like getting into a
Oh,
school
yeah.
and going there. But then even when you're there,
Yeah.
there's other things to apply for and there's grades to look at and there's like
Hmm.
professors you want to work with and there's like more applications and more things. It just never ends.
Hmm.
And I feel like that is so exhausting.
Yeah. So I think it's so important, like, as soon as you can, to be comfortable reevaluating these things and being true to yourself. Because, like I said, it's just so easy to be on autopilot and be like, okay, what's the next thing I have to tackle? Like, because it feels like, in a way, for me, easier to control when I know, okay, I need to study this much to get these grades. I need to volunteer
Yeah.
for this much to get to this, rather than like being with my own thoughts and being like, what do you feel? That seems like a question that I can't really answer in 2 seconds. So let's move on. You know, so
How are you
yeah.
really? Like
Anyway.
yeah, like slowing down to evaluate And it's just like, yeah, it's easier to go with the current of what everyone else is doing, but like taking a step back
Mhm.
to be like, actually, is this what I want?
Mhm.
And I think that kind of ties into like one of the things that I'm learning right now, or just this realization I had recently, which is just, how do I even say this? I just realized like having the life of your dreams is not enough.
Right.
I think I was like looking around at my life and I was like, wow,
Mhm.
me, how many years ago, I never thought I would be in this place. Like, I
Yeah.
never thought I would be doing these things, like living where I'm living, like
Mhm.
having the friendships that I have and whatever.
Mhm.
But I was looking at that and being like, wow, this is exactly like, I didn't dream of this because I couldn't have dreamed of this.
Mhm.
It feels like a dream, but then it's like, it's still not enough. It's still not gonna make me ultimately happy or like
Yeah.
always joyful. You're not going to have a perfect
Mhm.
life regardless.
Yeah.
Like, even when you feel like, oh, you finally have everything that you thought you wanted or whatever.
Mhm.
And just like having that realization was like, dang.
I feel like there's like two ways to see that because the other way you're like, will I ever be truly happy?
And it doesn't mean you can't like sit in
Yeah.
it and like celebrate the good things,
Mhm.
but it's like also realizing, at least for me, it's like, okay, it comes from my faith, like true satisfaction, because I know that even when I feel like, oh, like I finally made it, it's like,
But there's gonna
okay,
be bad days at work, or like someone's
yeah,
gonna piss you off on the train. Like something's gonna happen. I feel like being happy is the current state of being, and like it
yeah,
can never be endless. Like there's gonna be ups and downs
yeah.
regardless of whatever situation you're in.
But you don't foresee that,
Yeah.
especially with like you're saying, like working towards these goals.
Mhm.
Your goal right now is like to finish med school
Mhm.
and get into residency, and mine for a while was to get into law school. And then it's like it happens, and you're like,
Okay, on to the next thing.
I don't know. It was just like a strange realization that I never considered.
Yeah. I mean, we're constantly growing. It is crazy. Cause yeah, you can't imagine where your life is gonna be in 10 years because so many things changes in like 1 year. You meet new people. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I've been learning or just thinking about, and I'm curious if you've had this experience, is just like you were saying, like we just don't know where we'll be.
Hmm.
I think a few years ago, I had an idea of who would be in my life.
Mm.
Based on the people that were currently in my life,
Yeah.
I had an idea of who would be in my life, as in like them continuing to be in my life,
Hmm.
and also like an idea of the space that they would hold in my life.
Mm.
And I thought like that wouldn't
Yeah.
change. And I think now I'm like, a lot of those things have
Yeah.
changed.
Hmm.
A lot of those people in my life don't hold the position that I thought they would hold if they are still in my life at all.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a weird thing to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had that same realization.
Yeah, 100% I have. And I feel like as a girl too, like our friendships are different. The bonds that we make with other women are so close. And sometimes I feel like I sit back, I'm like, okay, I'm like expected to find a partner that's my best friend. Like I can't imagine a man ever like making me feel as secure and I don't know, seen as some of my girlfriends do. And so I think that that's what makes it so hard when some of those relationships do inevitably change just because sometimes you're just like on different paths in life and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily like even about like a fight or anything like that. Like some people just do
Yeah.
change and it is hard to like accept that sometimes, but I don't know, life comes at you crazy. And
Yeah.
so yes, I've definitely experienced that and it's sad for me.
Yeah, no, like literally that's what I was thinking about. I think in some ways you have to like mourn the idea
Hmm.
that you had of your relationship.
Yeah.
Cuz like I had this idea of what it would be and like what position you would hold.
Hmm.
And now I'm like that's not the reality at all
Yeah.
in some cases. And like that can be a positive thing
Hmm. That's
sometimes.
true.
Like maybe there's someone that was in your life that you didn't really
That's
think
true.
you didn't really think much of the friendship or something, and then they become like someone that's really important to you.
Mhm.
But then like, sometimes it can be a more negative thing or just like a sad thing, like you were saying.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just so weird because you just never.
How like one person you like talk to every single day and all of a sudden like y'all don't speak. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
crazy change.
Yeah. Because like you could talk about that like on one hand with relationships. I feel like it's
Mhm.
easier to understand. Like romantic
Yeah.
relationships, that is like more,
Yeah.
I don't know, predictable maybe
Mhm.
if things end. But like friendships, I don't know. It's just weird.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of already started talking about this with you being in grad school, but I'm just curious to know how you feel like it's impacted your growth,
Mhm.
especially because I'm about to start and,
Yeah.
I'm kind of scared. So,
I think it's just been like a very humbling experience.
really.
Yes, just because I mean, you're obviously surrounded by driven, intelligent, like amazing people, and it pushes you to be
Mhm.
better. But also for me, it I guess showed me like all sides of medicine. Like I think before going into medicine, like people usually will be encouraging and they'll tell you like, oh, like it's amazing. And it is amazing, but obviously like there's things in healthcare that, our American healthcare system is not the best and you see like the actual realities of what you can and can't do for patients. And for me, I think with the whole quarter life crisis thing I was mentioning in the first years of med school, it was just like going to classes and taking exams. And in a way, I like kind of lost sight of why I wanted to do it. But now that I'm in
Mhm.
rotations and I'm actually getting to see patients, and like I actually remember why I chose this field in the first place, it's always been about people and being there for them when they're at like the most vulnerable. And so it's just been such a privilege to actually learn in this space, just seeing like how crazy the technology is, but also just like learning directly from patients. They let medical students come in there and essentially add an
Mhm.
extra 30 minutes to the visit just to give us that experience. And yeah, it's just been really humbling and I've really enjoyed like rotation so far. So I think I'm slowly like gaining back that passion that I felt when I was first applying. Yeah, it's just like a lot of ups and downs though, obviously. And I've pushed myself, I think, to limits that I didn't think I was capable of, and I feel really like proud of myself.
Mhm. It's interesting talking about growing up, and it's like you are still growing up,
Yeah.
but now you're in this professional setting
Mhm.
that is molding you and the medical professional that you're going to be.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm just curious what it's like. It's like you're growing up, like you're like finding yourself, but then
Yeah.
you're also going through this really intense schooling process.
Mhm. I think it's because it's so like emotionally volatile sometimes. Like it really forced me to look within and ask myself like what it is that like fulfills me and makes me happy. Because I feel like if I wasn't pushed like that, maybe I would have just been fine doing whatever.
You think you would be a different person?
I think so for sure. Yeah. Because I mean, that's how you grow, right? Is by being pushed out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I need advice. How do I survive? How do I go through it without losing my mind?
It's just like all like the generic advice, right? But it's so true. You have to remember like who you are. You know what I mean? And like not be caught up in all of the things that like I'm sure you're going to be exposed to, like you said, chasing the bag and the accolades. Just constantly reminding you, like, okay, why is it that I'm here? What is it that I want to do? Checking in with yourself often, having a routine, that's such a big part of it because there were so many times like during my first year where I feel like I would just study and then in any free time that I had I just like rot in bed. It just was not good for your mental health. And then you do hit a point where it just feels really bad and really low because you've essentially have done this like all on your own.
Hmm.
So
You're saying like it could be like an isolating experience.
yes, it is isolating because your parents don't really know what you're going through, your friends don't know exactly what you're going through. But yeah, don't isolate yourself and like make time for yourself, even though it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's true, right? If you don't have your mental health anymore, then really like you can't even finish.
Mm-hmm.
It would be so much more difficult, I feel like.
And like the extra points or whatever that you'll get on that exam is not going to be that worth it. Like take that walk or whatever it is that you do for your own sanity, like for like 30 minutes, an hour a day, it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great advice. I need to write that down. I'm
Pretty
serious.
basic, but I don't know. I just feel like because I don't have all the answers.
But I don't think, I mean, maybe you think it's basic, but it's like if a lot of people are saying it, then it
That's
must be true,
true.
right?
But like actually do it. Like, you know what I mean? I think that's the hard part because you hear it so often and you're like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And then you quickly see how
Mm-hmm.
you will. That's the first thing you cut out, I feel
It
like.
is. And you think it's, oh, like I'm just going to cut it out for a few days. And then a few days turns into, oh, shoot, like I haven't done anything for myself in like a month.
Yeah.
Say yes to things. I think that's something that I realized too in med school. Like, there's always going to be more time to study. You're always going to have something to study for. But like, say yes to more things. I feel like you rarely regret hanging out with people that you care about, taking that time for yourself, just like be more
Mm.
open because it's worth it in the long run for your mental health.
Thank you for your advice. I appreciate it. Okay. On a more positive note, are you looking forward to anything when it comes to aging? I'm like aging like we're so old. We're like literally
Can you imagine
so
like 40-year-olds like listening to this? Like, what are they talking? And like 40's not
sorry.
even old.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Like, what is it?
Sorry to everyone above the age of 40.
Oh, you're just so funny.
I'm like,
We're
how do I
like
rephrase this
gross.
question?
Being old is gross.
How do I rephrase this?
Oh my gosh. To answer the question, what am I excited about? I think just getting to know myself better, like being more comfortable in my
Mm,
own skin, being
yeah.
aware of what my needs are, what my boundaries are. I think it just comes with a sense of freedom, being true to yourself and like surrounding yourself with people who know you for you and accept you for who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It like takes away the anxiety of like being perceived or like how others perceive you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to obviously require a lot of work to get there, but I think I'm just looking forward to feeling more at peace with myself. Hopefully that comes with age. I think it does, right? Just more
Yeah, that's what
wisdom.
I've heard.
So, yeah. What
Yeah.
about you?
I think that is definitely one of them. Like just being more sure of
Mm-hmm.
yourself, more comfortable in your own skin, all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like the older people get, the less they
They
care
lost,
about like
yeah,
what
they
they
don't
say.
care about anything.
Which is like like I want to get
Yeah.
there. Yeah, and I think that's tied to mine too, like confidence. I
Yeah.
feel like that kind of sums that up. And I think my other thing is maybe a greater sense of purpose.
Yeah.
I feel like going back to school, knowing that, okay, I do want to be a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And once I'm there, I'll have more clarity on like what type of law I want to practice
Yeah.
and probably feeling a more purpose through that, knowing that I am doing something that I'm passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm helping people. Probably same for you. Like once you know, okay, this is the type of doctor I want to be. I think that's something I'm looking forward to. Yeah, I'm just really interested to see like I don't know why I feel like I'm gonna come out of it being a different person. Like I'm not gonna be a different
100%.
person.
I mean, like, you're going to have different perspectives. You're going to know yourself more and be more confident.
Yeah. I just kind of want to get there, but I have to go through the process, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
It'll be crazy. It'll go by so fast.
Really?
Yes.
That's what they say.
Yes.
Is there anything else you wanted to say on this topic that you didn't get a chance to?
I don't know. I'm a work in progress constantly, realizing new things every day. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I said my piece.
You know that Kylie Jenner meme where she's like, I'm just realizing and like realizing.
No, no. What did she say?
Where she's like,
And I feel like this year is really about like the year of just realizing stuff, and everyone around me, we're all just like realizing things.
it's like
No, that's exactly how I feel right now.
oh my gosh, that's so funny. Okay, so how have things changed for you now that you have been able to reflect on how you were growing up, like feeling like you were more scared as a child and just dealing with fear and anxiety, and now getting to a point where you're like, okay, it was not that serious, but it felt really serious
Yeah.
at the time. So like how do you look at things when you're faced with those emotions?
I think in the moment, it still feels scary, but I'm trying to take more preventative measures. So, like journaling more and meditating, trying to do that like as much as I can because I do notice a difference in just like, I don't know, like my breathing almost throughout the day feels better. Whereas before approaching any new situation, there was always a tightness in my chest that I didn't even realize was there until it
Hmm.
wasn't anymore.
Wow.
And again, like also like just reminding myself, I'm okay, I'm safe. It's not that serious because if I don't do those things, it's just like right back to square one. And then like on top of not doing those things and not taking care of myself, not eating enough, not sleeping enough,
Hmm.
yeah, I could just get taken back to like that anxious little girl, you know?
Yeah.
So still trying to figure it out, but I think I'm getting better.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Like being intentional about keeping up with these practices that are healthy for
Hmm.
you. And yeah, I think it's just taking a step back because it's so true. Like our thoughts can be so consuming.
Hmm.
And when you're just dwelling on your thoughts, then you're like acting on those thoughts.
Hmm.
It's like, wait, actually, like that thought is not true.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Hmm.
That's great. And I think it's true as well that like the situations only get scarier.
Hmm.
Maybe as a child, it was your piano recital, but now
Right.
it's a board exam, which is actually scary.
Or like making a mistake with a patient, like, you know?
Yeah.
It's just crazy, yeah. But the stakes in a way do get higher.
Yeah. The stakes get higher. And so it's good that you
Hmm.
are tackling those things.
Yeah.
You're being more proactive about it.
Hmm.
I think that's really important.
I think therapy is obviously important too, but it's just so hard to find someone that you feel like heard and like you feel like they understand your experience. Because I had a therapist for a second last semester that is through the school system. And he was really
Hmm.
good at talking to me about the academic parts of myself, right? Like how like academic validation is so tied to like sense of self and like tackling that part of things. But when it came to talking to him about the experience of dating or like with my family, like it just there wasn't that connection.
Hmm.
So that process has been kind of hard, like finding someone that I feel like can understand all parts of my life and all parts of me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's definitely worth, like, if you try someone and then it's not the right fit,
Hmm.
like, trying. Sometimes, yeah, it is kind of like a Cinderella.
Yeah.
What's the perfect fit?
Hmm.
But yeah, you will find someone
Hmm.
because it is really important to be able to talk about all those things to one person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like even thinking about myself. I feel like I processed a lot through therapy,
Hmm.
like along with aging and stuff, that I would have been harder for me to process otherwise
Hmm.
on my own.
Yeah. It's so crazy because sometimes you don't even realize how much you're feeling until a stranger who knows nothing about your situation asks, so, what's going on? And like, waterworks. What is it going
Not what isn't going on. No, and it's even like literally, I do not think this happened when I was younger. But now it's like my body catches up to things
Yeah.
before my
Hmm.
mind does. So like you will just like start being emotional and you're like, why am I emotional? Like, I'm totally fine. Like, what's going on? And then like later on, your brain is like, oh, actually, I was like, actually, like this thing happened and I was responding to that. But like my brain, isn't that so crazy?
Insane. Yeah.
And like, I'm getting older and this is happening. Like, why isn't that backwards? Like, shouldn't my brain be like it's not quick catch up? Like, what's going on?
I think it's like with age, we learn to like suppress our emotions to like an appropriate time to show it, right? When we're children, like we just do whatever, and then our parents are like, "This is not the place." Like, you know what I mean? And then so you learn to do it really well.
Yeah, without even thinking.
Yeah. Because literally, this is what drove me to therapy in the first place. I remember I was like doing my makeup one day. I was like, I feel like kind of stressed, but like it's fine. I said, let me.
Sorry, it's not funny.
I said, let me do the right thing, and probably like before it gets really bad, let me go talk to a therapist, right? And so I call. I'm like, wow, I'm being so healthy right now. Let me call the student hotline and like try to schedule something. I call them. All I gotta say is, hi, how are you? Immediately, like I was driving to school because I thought it was just like I'm just gonna be on the phone and ask for an appointment. It's gonna be fine. I'm driving to school. Why am I bawling like to this random lady? And she thought that I needed help immediately, and she's like, "Can you please call the hotline?" Like I said, "I'm fine." As I'm like choking on tears, I'm like, "I'm fine. I promise I'm fine."
No,
yeah, it was crazy, and I was like, I did not realize I was bottling all of these things up inside of me. Like, what is going on right now?
Yeah, that is like so crazy. And it's like so crazy because it's so real.
Yeah.
That is not just like a unique experience that you are having. Like it's very common. And like it's because you need to process, but you're not processing. And so if you're not like proactive about processing, your body's just going to process in its own way and like force you to get there. And so, that question of like, how are you or like what's going on? Like it triggered something in your brain to be like, oh, like a lot is going on actually. Literally watch Inside Out too, but they showed that.
Yeah.
The suppressing aspect of how like now that she's a teenager, she's like able to do that.
And the rumination room where they're drawing out like all the different possibilities.
Oh yeah, the anxiety.
I was like, why is this Oh, and then made me feel bad for my poor brain. I'm like, okay, like I need to turn this off.
Literally. But I do think it was a really great movie. Like low-key, I think that movie was helping us process our emotions because you're able to like see them in front of you and see how they like interact. And then once you take a step back, you're like, oh, that is how my emotions
and how like irrational it can be sometimes.
Yeah. And just like suppressing and all those things. So like I say, I'm always the biggest proponent for therapy. If you're thinking about it, you should do it.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to Quynh for processing this season of life with me. Honestly, experiencing a quarter-life crisis isn't what I thought it'd be. It really just feels like growing up. If you'd like to listen to other conversations on similar topics, I've linked some of my previous related episodes in the description. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on our conversation or your quarter-life crisis experience. You can reach me via Instagram at the Making Space Podcast, where you should also follow for more content. Please rate and follow the podcast wherever you listen and share this episode with someone who would benefit from hearing our conversation. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode of Making Space. Bye!